Hi, I'm back much earlier than expected because the next book that I read, I just absolutely raced through it several times because there was something so new, so exciting, so spectacular. It's Field by Jos Charles. Now, Jos Charles, she has another book out that's more recent, which I've immediately ordered, and so hopefully I will read that as soon as possible as well for this silly challenge. But I'm so incredibly excited about having found this book, and it was just such serendipity because I was listening to a podcast. It was only 2 days ago. There's several really good poetry podcasts, and I'll talk about that in another video in more detail with my recommendations. But this particular podcast is called Breaking Form, and they were talking about, they joke around a lot. They were talking about people who won Pulitzer Prizes for poetry, people who they would have preferred to have won. And as you can see, the book says that this book, on the cover, there's that little gold medal. I do love a little gold medal. And it says Pulitzer Prize finalist. And they were saying, the hosts of the podcast were saying that they really felt that Jos Charles should have received it for Field. And so I immediately looked her up. And I was just able to access the book within 2 days. It arrived here, which is usually unheard of, especially for poetry books. So here I am, and I open this book up, and at first I think, actually, I'm not going to be able to make head or tail out of it because it reads like Middle English. It reminds me of the time in high school when my English teacher introduced our class to Canterbury Tales. And, if you've ever come across medieval English, it sounds like a foreign language. And what Jos Charles is doing here is definitely playing with that, but also playing with language as a whole. And that's something that's really exciting to me, to take words and massage them into other identities. And part of the enjoyment of reading this book is that challenge. And I do recommend, if you're going to read this book, which please purchase it. I do recommend that you read it out loud to yourself. It helps you to ease into the language because the spelling of the words has changed so much that sometimes you're not even aware of the connections with English. How can I describe this book to you? In this book, Jos Charles is trying to convey, and is very successfully conveying, what it's like to be a trans woman in a world that doesn't understand you, doesn't accept you, persecutes you. But on top of that, there are no words for you. You don't have a vocabulary. All the language that is used to describe who you are, to talk about you, all the language is wrong. It's actually wrong. It gives you no history. It gives you no context. It dehumanizes you. And this is really a case where it takes a poet to enter the language and really start to explore what's missing and to create something new. And this is done so well within this book. Then again, it's not only about being trans. It's about language in and of itself. It's how do you see yourself? How do you see your body? How do you see yourself within the context of the objects around you, in the context of nature. It brings to mind a book that I recently bought. I haven't really read through it. It just came out, called Queer Nature. It's an anthology. I'll link it below. And of course, I was halfway through the book Field, and I immediately realized that the poet is also exploring the pastoral. What is it like to be a trans woman poet within nature? How do you look at a tree? Do you want to bring in a moth or a bee into your poems? And of course, I immediately looked Jos Charles up in here, and sure enough, one of the poems from the book Field is in here. Of course, and not that I was surprised, but it's nice that I'm already feeling very familiar with Jos Charles. I'm already feeling familiar with her poetry, and it happened so quickly. And it would only happen, I don't think it would have happened as easily, as smoothly, my comfort in these poems. I don't think it would have happened in that way, if not for the Seeley Challenge. Because once again, I'm going to be very repetitive, but it can't hurt to repeat myself, really. Pushing myself through the poem because I simply want to finish it as a first reading was vital. It was vital because by the end, I understood it. And so what I thought I'd do is I would recite one of the poems and handwrite it for you so that you can have a look at, what it's like, how the sound compares to the page, to the text. And also I'm going to link to 2 YouTube videos, one in which Jos Charles reads several of her poems, another in which she reads the poems, but also discusses them as she reads them. And this is absolutely so precious. It's more precious than gold, because she gives very helpful insights into what you as a reader are probably intuitively feeling as you read, but aren't quite sure what's going on. For example, I wrote notes because I thought she was just so fascinating. She said that, she's working on a type of speculative language, and she wanted it to feel like it was, why did she bring the medieval English in? And it's because she wanted it to feel like it had a history, and she wants to bring a quality of classicism, of the classic, of the historical into the language. And that's another reason she mentioned for having Roman numerals as titles. And what that also did was that it created for her a feeling when she reread the poems, her own poems, she says, of feeling a loss, because she realizes, as you will when reading the poems, what a loss it is that this language, this context, this history, the classical nature of the way she's written the poems actually does not correlate with reality, doesn't have any presence in the everyday life of a trans person. Then there's also a lot of other things happening with the different spelling and different phrasing of the English words. There are different relationships you see within words and between words. And she mentioned something that was immediately apparent to me. The word, for example, in, I-N, spelled I-double-N, you see it differently, you hear it differently. In becomes a place where you can stay for a while and rest. I I really enjoyed this book. I'm going to be going back to several poems throughout the day because it's really only lunchtime now. That's how enthusiastic I am about this book, and I felt that it needed its own video. So I'm just going to now cut into my reciting of the one poem and my writing it by hand, which should whet your appetite for this book, and immediately go and buy it. If you're after something that's very exciting that's happening in the poetry world at the moment, this is where it's at. Don't forget, the only real property is the property of the mind. From my house of possibility to yours, I'll see you next time. Bye.
This is a poem from the book Field by Jos Charles. It's number 26. Little-hearted moth boy, tight and shut, in a keeper's hive. Lose your soured eye. I too rejected a word, only to see it grown tangible. A nettled mound of denuded flesh, round its mouth. It's not you but your insides that are so valuable. See how tenderly we mine cultural whole, seemingly out the ground.